Everyone saw the woman's curtains twitch that morning, but no one could have guessed she was dialing 911 for the 12th time in 2 months. I was just sitting on my back deck, sipping coffee with an old friend, when the first ripple of trouble started. The sky over Pinewood Heights was that rare kind of blue you almost want to drink in. Saturday morning, early April, a peaceful suburban postcard. My cabin-style house sat at the end of Pine Ridge Drive, a 2-bedroom place I'd bought, with 8 years of SWAT commander pay. Wrap-around porch. Tall pines casting shifting shadows over the lawn. It was the first place in my life where I thought I might actually get some quiet. Lisa Rodriguez, my old academy partner, now a homicide detective, had dropped by. We weren't talking about anything dangerous. Just 2 cops catching up, trading case stories, laughing over arrests that had gone sideways in ways only law enforcement could appreciate. She'd brought some old files from a cold case she was working, yellowed photos, brittle reports, the kind of thing that smells faintly of dust and old grief. That's when I saw her, Eleanor Whitmore. She was framed perfectly in her kitchen, window, head tilted, eyes fixed on us like a hawk sighting prey. Eleanor was the self-appointed president of our HOA, the type of woman who wore a blazer to take out the trash. Platinum blonde bob, pearl earrings, a face set in permanent disapproval. She was known for noticing everything and liking nothing. I'd lived next to her for 8 months, and in that time, she'd complained about my grass being a 1/4 inch too long, my garbage can 6 inches too far left, and my police-issued SUV parked in the driveway, which she said ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity. I was mid-laugh when she disappeared from the window. Didn't think much of it, until my phone buzzed 20 minutes later. Jake, my sister Emma, said the moment I answered, her dispatcher tone sharpened with disbelief. "You're not going to believe this. I just took a 911 call. From your address. Some woman reported you're illegally exchanging weapons in your backyard." I glanced at Lisa, who was raising an eyebrow like she already knew the punchline. "Weapons?" I repeated. Emma read the report. "2 individuals in civilian clothing exchanging documents in a suspicious manner. She claims it's highly criminal in nature." Lisa's laugh hit the air hard enough to spook the blue jays in the trees. "Please tell me your neighbor thinks cold case files are weapons." I didn't laugh. "She's called before, hasn't she?" "Jake?" "She's called 12 times in the past 2 months," Emma admitted. "And not just about this. She says you're laundering money because you get Amazon deliveries during the day, conducting surveillance because you look out your own front window, and my personal favorite, you're feeding an organized crime syndicate because you ordered pizza at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday." Lisa was doubled over by now, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. But I wasn't smiling. This was more than annoying. Eleanor wasn't just gossiping, she was building a record. And in my line of work, I knew what that could mean. Then came the notification from the Pinewood Heights Community Forum. A post by Eleanor herself. Urgent. Illegal weapons activity in progress at 247 Pine Ridge Drive 4. Multiple suspicious individuals, exchanging dangerous materials. Authorities contacted. Residents remain vigilant. Neighbors were already chiming in. "Isn't that Jake, the SWAT commander?" one asked. Eleanor's replies were frantic. "That's exactly what he wants you to think. He's infiltrated this neighborhood under cover of law enforcement." Lisa shook her head. "Jake, this woman's not just nosy. This is obsession." She was right. I'd seen it before, the kind of fixation that makes people see threats in every shadow. And sometimes it meant they were hiding something themselves. That's when Emma called again. Her voice was tighter now. "She just filed another report. Says you're mocking law enforcement by," and I quote, "laughing," while pointing at law-abiding citizens. "She's demanding a full property search." I looked at Eleanor's house. She was back at the window scribbling in a notebook, watching me like she owned the truth and I was trespassing on it. When our eyes met, she didn't look away, just raised her palm in a stiff, stop-right-there gesture, as if she could arrest me from 50 feet away. "You know what, Emma?" I said slowly. "Send a patrol unit. If she wants to play with police reports, let's play." I didn't know it yet, but that single call was the first crack in the facade Eleanor Whitmore had built, a facade hiding something far darker than paranoia. Within 15 minutes, a black and white slid to the curb. Officers Martinez and Chen stepped out, both old colleagues from joint operations. Professional nods, but I could see the amusement flickering in their eyes. "Commander Thompson," Martinez said, "we understand there's been a report of suspicious activity at this address." Lisa flashed her badge. "Detective Rodriguez, Metro Homicide. Those suspicious documents were murder case files from 15 years ago. Unless reviewing cold cases is now a crime, I think we're clear." We weren't clear, because that's when Eleanor came storming out of her front door, manila folder in hand, pearls gleaming like battle armor. "Officers, thank God you're here," she announced, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn. "I've documented criminal activity at this residence for months. Dates, times, photographic evidence. This man is running a criminal enterprise under our noses." Martinez flipped through her folder. Photos of me taking out trash, timestamps meticulously noted, pictures of Lisa arriving this morning, labeled possible reconnaissance, a 5-page analysis of my vehicle leaving at irregular times. "Ma'am," Chen said, trying to keep a straight face, "these are normal activities." But Eleanor was undeterred. She pulled out a hand-drawn criminal network chart, including the UPS driver, my lawn guy, and Mrs. Patterson 3 houses down. "You need to search his refrigerator," she insisted. "That's where criminals hide the important stuff." And in that moment, that oddly specific, almost too personal moment, Lisa's eyes met mine. We both knew. People don't imagine hiding evidence in refrigerators unless they've thought about it before. A lot. Her words still hung in the air. "Search his refrigerator," when my phone buzzed again. Emma. And this time, her voice wasn't amused. "Jake. I've been pulling her record. She's called 911 31 times in the last 3 months. Not just about you, about everyone." I stepped away from the patrol officers, lowering my voice. "Everyone?" "Yeah. She's reported the mail carrier for loitering, an ambulance for being fake because it didn't use sirens. She's called in kids playing in the park, landscaping crews, neighbors walking their dogs. And here's the kicker. 3 months ago, she called about a strange smell in her own house, then canceled 20 minutes later, said she handled it herself." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "What date?" Emma typed, her nails clicking like a metronome. "March 15th, 2:47 p.m. I froze. That was the same date Eleanor had just mentioned to the news crew. The date she seemed fixated on. The same day her stepson, Tommy, vanished from social media like a ghost swallowed whole. I glanced at Eleanor. She was still in the yard, hands clenched, watching every move I made. "Emma," I said, "check missing persons connected to her address, around that date." More typing. A pause. Then, "No official report, but there's a Tommy Whitmore, age 25, listed at her address on his last job record. And here's the thing. No activity on his bank accounts since March 14th. I ended the call and walked back toward Eleanor, my face neutral but my pulse hammering. "How's Tommy doing these days?" I asked casually, loud enough for Martinez and Chen to hear. Her reaction was instant, like I'd flipped a breaker inside her. She went pale, then flushed red. Her hands trembled as she stammered something about him being on an extended European vacation. She wouldn't stop glancing toward her house, as if afraid something inside might be visible. Chen closed his notepad. "We're done here," he told her. But I wasn't. That night, The pines outside my cabin swayed under a restless wind. I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, piecing together the timeline. Tommy's last post, March 15th. Eleanor's canceled 911 call, March 15th. Deep cleaning service in her basement, March 1st. New industrial freezer delivered, March 8th. The pattern was there, if you knew how to see it, and Lisa knew. When I called her, she didn't hesitate. If you're right, the smell she reported wasn't wildlife, and that comment about refrigerators, that's not paranoia, that's experience. Experience with what? Hiding things you can't explain, she said, her voice low, or don't want found. By morning, Lisa was on my porch with coffee and a grim look. I did some digging on Tommy. 3 months before he disappeared, he contacted a probate lawyer to challenge Eleanor's control over his father's estate. She'd been executor until he turned 25 in February. In that time, she drained almost $200,000 from the accounts, claimed it was for property maintenance. She even took out a second mortgage on the house. That's motive, I said. That's more than motive, Lisa replied. That's 250,000 reasons to make sure Tommy never inherited. Before I could respond, my phone lit up with another forum notification. Eleanor had posted, again, urgent update. Jake Thompson is now bringing in additional criminal associates to intimidate law-abiding residents. Photographic evidence attached. The evidence was Lisa, holding the coffee she'd brought me that morning. But something was shifting. The comments below were brutal. That's Detective Rodriguez. She's with Metro Homicide. Eleanor, this is getting ridiculous. Maybe you're the problem here. For the first time, the tide was turning against her. And the more she typed, the more unhinged she sounded. While Eleanor spiraled online, Lisa and I kept building the timeline. We saw how meticulous she'd been before March 15th. Deep clean the basement, buy the freezer, rent a carpet cleaner, stock up on industrial odor eliminator, and then Lisa dropped the biggest find yet. Jake, someone's been calling 911 to cancel missing person reports under Tommy's name 4 times, and voice analysis says it's a 97% match for Eleanor's voice. That was it. The thread that, if pulled, could unravel everything. Outside, Eleanor's blinds twitched again. I could feel her eyes on me, even from across the street. She didn't know it yet, but the net was tightening. What I didn't realize was that she was about to fight back, and in doing so, hand us the very evidence we needed. I should have expected Eleanor to double down, but even I didn't think she'd go nuclear. 2 days after Lisa and I confirmed she'd been impersonating Tommy on 911 calls, she called the local news Channel 7's crime reporter, Jennifer Walsh. Got the story request directly from Eleanor herself, a community leader, demanding an investigation into police corruption and organized crime inside Pinewood Heights. I found out about it when my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from old colleagues, neighbors, even my mother. Jake, you're on the news. When I turned on the TV, there she was. Eleanor Whitmore in her living room wearing pearls and a soft beige blazer, sitting straight-backed like she was on trial. Only she thought she was the judge. I've been documenting suspicious activity for months, she told Walsh. Jake Thompson claims to be a police officer, but his behavior patterns are completely inconsistent with legitimate law enforcement. He meets with known criminal associates, receives packages at unusual hours, and uses operational security tactics typical of organized crime. Lisa, watching beside me, gave a sharp, incredulous laugh. Operational security? She's accusing you of running a mob because you close your curtains at night. But what caught my attention wasn't the lies. It was the detail. Eleanor described my daily routines with surgical precision. What time I left for work. What time I came home. Who visited for how long. She'd been tracking me like a suspect for months, and then came the date. The night of March 15th, she said, I observed Thompson moving large, heavy objects in his backyard under cover of darkness, clearly attempting to dispose of something. I froze. That was the same day she'd called 911 about a smell in her own house. The same day Tommy went silent. "Why pick that date?" Lisa murmured. "Unless it's burned into her mind for a reason." To her credit, Walsh pushed back. "Mrs. Whitmore, records show you've called 911 over 30 times in the past 3 months. Some neighbors say you might be the source of these problems." Eleanor's smile thinned. "Those calls were legitimate. Someone has to protect this neighborhood from criminal infiltration." Walsh nodded slowly, then went in for the strike. "Where is Tommy Whitmore? We understand he hasn't been seen for months." For the first time, Eleanor's composure cracked. Her hands shook. Her voice pitched up. "Tommy is traveling in Europe. He's a grown man. He doesn't have to check in with me," Walsh pressed again. "His employer says he quit without notice in March. His social media went silent the same week. Are you certain he's traveling voluntarily?" "This interview is over," Eleanor snapped, standing so fast her coffee cup tipped. "You've been influenced by the same criminals protecting Thompson." The segment ended with her storming out of frame. If she thought the broadcast would sway the community, she miscalculated. By the time it hit the Pinewood Heights forum, the comment section had turned into an open revolt. "She followed my daughter home from school. She's got cameras pointed into my backyard. She tried to block our landscapers from working." Post after post painted the picture of a woman who had been spiraling for months, maybe years. And then came the one that made my skin prickle. Mrs. Garcia, Eleanor's other next-door neighbor, wrote, "I couldn't sleep the night of March 15th. The smell from her house was terrible. Around midnight, I saw her in the backyard hosing down a large plastic tarp. She was wearing gloves and a mask and kept looking around like she didn't want anyone to see her. She'd even attached photos. Grainy, but clear enough to show the outline of a tarp, cleaning supplies, and a hose spraying down concrete near Eleanor's basement door." The story spread like wildfire. By morning, Channel 7 was running a follow-up with the headline, "New Evidence Emerges in Pinewood Heights Mystery." The enhanced photos were sharper, showing the tarp, the gloves, the wet pavement. Eleanor's online response was instant and unhinged. Accusations of trespassing, claims the photos were doctored, demands for police investigations into Mrs. Garcia. Every sentence reeked of desperation. But to anyone watching closely, it was obvious. The woman who'd spent months trying to frame me was losing control of her own narrative. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to make the one mistake no guilty person should ever make. She was going to put herself in a room full of neighbors, detectives, and witnesses and talk. Eleanor called it an emergency HOA safety meeting. What she really wanted was a public stage. The notice went out on the Pinewood Heights forum the same night Mrs. Garcia's photos hit the news. She claimed she would be presenting critical evidence of coordinated criminal activity threatening the neighborhood. Lisa's first words when she saw it were, "Jake, she's about to hang herself." Saturday evening, the community center was packed wall to wall. Every folding chair filled, people lining the walls, some even recording before the meeting began. You could feel the tension, part curiosity, part morbid anticipation. Eleanor walked in like she owned the place. Courtroom suit, pearls, a sleek briefcase clutched like a weapon. She stood at the front, hooked her laptop to the projector, and the title slide appeared. Criminal Networks. In Residential Areas. A Case Study. For 20 minutes, she spoke with the confidence of someone utterly convinced of her own story. Slide after slide. Pictures of me taking out the trash, Amazon packages on my porch, Lisa's car in my driveway, charts of my vehicle patterns with red arrows, maps of the neighborhood dotted with houses she claimed were criminal affiliates. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, clicking to a close-up of me shaking hands with Mr. Patterson across the street. "What you see here is the playbook of organized crime. Hiding in plain sight. I watched the faces in the room. Most weren't buying it. A few exchanged incredulous looks. Some openly smirked. And then Mrs. Patterson stood up. 70 years old, hair pinned back, hands steady. "Eleanor," she said, voice loud enough to carry over the murmur, "before you accuse Jake of running a gang, maybe you should explain why your stepson disappeared right when you started obsessing over everyone else. Where exactly is Tommy?" The room went still. Eleanor's smile twitched. "Tommy is a grown man. He chose to distance himself from negative influences." Lisa stood from the back, calm, deliberate. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Detective Rodriguez. Metro Homicide. We've spoken to Tommy's employer. He stopped showing up in March without notice. His bank accounts have been inactive for months. And we have voice analysis confirming that you impersonated him in phone calls to cancel missing. Person reports." Eleanor froze, just for a heartbeat, then tried to recover. "Those were misunderstandings. Lisa didn't let her. We've also confirmed you withdrew over $200,000 from Tommy's inheritance after he vanished. You bought industrial cleaning supplies, a commercial freezer, and consulted with an estate lawyer about unreachable beneficiaries. All within days of his disappearance." The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the projector fan. Something broke in Eleanor's face. Her composure shattered, and what came out wasn't calculated anymore. It was raw, defensive rage. "You don't understand what Tommy was planning to do to me," she shouted. "He wanted to take everything. I raised that boy since he was 12. I managed his father's estate. I made sure he had everything, and how did he repay me? By hiring lawyers to audit me, threatening to have me investigated, throwing me out of my own home." Gasps rolled through the crowd. Lisa's voice stayed steady. "What do you mean, Mrs. Whitmore, when you say he left you no choice?" Eleanor's breathing hitched. "He's dead," she blurted. "Tommy is dead, and I had to protect myself. He would have destroyed everything his father built." Her words hit like a detonation. A wave of shocked whispers swept the room, but Eleanor didn't stop. The months of paranoia, the need to justify herself, spilled out faster now. "I put anti-freeze in his protein shake," she said, tears cutting through her foundation. 3 days, he thought it was the flu. When he died, I preserved the body until I could secure the inheritance. I couldn't let anyone find him before that." Lisa's eyes locked on mine. That was it. We had her. I stood. My voice carried over the chaos. "Eleanor Whitmore, you're under arrest for the murder of Tommy Whitmore." The neighbors surged forward, not to block me, but to watch. Some were already dialing 911. She didn't fight when I cuffed her, but she kept talking, explaining how she'd drained his accounts, sold his belongings, and crafted the story of his European trip. The same story she'd been selling to anyone who would listen for months. The emergency HOA meeting had become something else entirely, a murder confession recorded from half a dozen angles, witnessed by 40 neighbors. And for Eleanor Whitmore, there was no walking that back. They took her that night, but the real work started Monday morning. The search warrant had barely been signed before my SWAT team rolled up to Eleanor's front door. Not as neighbors this time, as law enforcement. The house looked the same. As always from the outside, white trim, perfect hedges, blinds drawn with surgical precision. Inside, it was a different world. Every surface spotless, every drawer organized like a crime scene staged for a photograph. The basement was our target. We found the freezer exactly where she'd said in her outburst. Industrial grade, gleaming. Stainless steel, the kind designed to store bulk meat, or something you didn't want anyone to see. The coroner was there when we opened it. The hiss of escaping cold air cut through the silence, and then Tommy, perfectly preserved, as if he were still asleep, still wearing the t-shirt and sweats from the night Eleanor poisoned him. But Tommy wasn't alone. In the far corner of the basement, Behind stacks of holiday decorations, we found a second bundle. Heavy, wrapped in thick plastic sheeting and duct tape. We cut it open, layer by layer, until skeletal remains appeared. Robert Whitmore, Eleanor's first husband. The man she'd claimed died of a heart attack 5 years earlier. The forensic team worked fast. Robert's bones told a story. Long-term arsenic poisoning. Small doses, administered over months, mimicking the symptoms of heart disease until the inevitable happened. Eleanor had played the devoted caregiver, logging his declining health in detailed journals to sell the illusion. When he finally died, she collected his life insurance without raising a single eyebrow. Tommy's death had been the same cruelty in a different costume. The antifreeze poisoning had been researched meticulously on her laptop. Search history, full of phrases like undetectable poisons, ethylene glycol symptoms, and how long does antifreeze stay in the body? Her journals were worse. Meticulous entries about Robert's weakness, Tommy's fever, their confusion and trust as they drank what she gave them. No guilt, just a clinical, almost smug satisfaction that she was protecting the family legacy. The financial crimes filled in the rest. Over the past 5 years, Eleanor had siphoned nearly $600,000 from insurance payouts, estate accounts, and inheritance funds. She'd used it to pay off gambling debts, buy luxury items. She hid from neighbors and keep her polished image intact. To the outside world, she was the HOA's moral compass. In reality, she was a predator with a taste for slow poison and total control. As word spread, the neighborhood's shock turned into something else: survivor's guilt. People began to wonder just how close they'd come to being next, Mrs. Garcia found a spiral notebook in Eleanor's trash, pages of handwritten surveillance notes on every household in Pinewood Heights. Daily routines, financial situations, relationship tensions. Some entries hinted at more. Possible insurance benefit if accident occurs, written beside certain names. The Pattersons discovered Eleanor had been feeding their dog treats. That, when tested, contained small traces of antifreeze. The Johnsons found printouts on claiming life insurance for non-relatives after accidental death in their mailbox, something Eleanor must have accidentally misdelivered while researching. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became. Eleanor's campaign against me hadn't just been a distraction. It was a shield she'd been building for years, the image of the vigilant neighbor, the woman too busy catching everyone else's crimes to possibly commit any herself. Now, with 2 murders confirmed and a laundry list of fraud, identity, theft, and harassment charges, that image was in ashes. Still, Eleanor never stopped talking. From the holding cell, she insisted she'd done what was necessary, that ungrateful heirs and careless husbands wasted what others built. She called her killings preventative maintenance. For the first time since moving to Pinewood Heights, I could drink my coffee without watching for her eyes in the window. But peace didn't feel like victory. Not yet. Because I knew Eleanor. And I knew there was more buried in her past than we'd even begun to dig up. By the time Eleanor went to trial, Pinewood Heights was unrecognizable. The lawns still gleamed, the HOA still met, but you could feel it, a quiet wariness in every conversation, a shared knowledge that the monster next door had been real. The media descended like vultures. Camera crews lined the courthouse steps. Headlines called her the HOA widow and the suburban poisoner. Every new detail from the investigation was front-page material. The journals, the bank withdrawals, the freezer. Inside the courtroom, she looked exactly as she had in her HOA president days. Blazer pressed, hair immaculate, pearls in place. You'd never know she'd spent the past 9 months in county jail. Her defense team tried everything. First, they hinted at dementia. Then they floated the idea of temporary insanity brought on by stress. But the prosecution had a mountain of evidence. Voice analysis proving she impersonated Tommy on 911 calls. Financial records showing systematic theft from her husband's and stepson's estates. Internet searches for poisons, their symptoms, and disposal methods. Witness testimony placing her in the backyard the night of March 15th, hosing down a plastic tarp. And then there were the journals. The prosecutor read passages aloud, her voice steady even when the words made the room flinch. Eleanor had described Robert's failing health as satisfying progress. Tommy's final days were recorded with the cold detachment of a lab report. Day 3, fever peaked, less mobile, likely final stage. When it was her turn to speak, Eleanor showed no shame, no hesitation. "I did what was necessary," she told the jury, her tone almost lecturing. Tommy was going to waste everything his father built. Robert was killing himself slowly with his choices. I intervened. I protected what mattered. The prosecutor let the silence hang for a beat before asking, "Mrs. Whitmore, do you believe killing your husband and stepson was justified?" "I believe," Eleanor said, "that some people are too irresponsible to be trusted with the things that matter. I didn't take lives. I preserved a legacy." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the judge's face hardened. The trial lasted less than 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for under 4 hours. Guilty on every major charge. 2 counts of first-degree murder, fraud, identity theft, harassment, dozens of lesser offenses. When the judge read her sentence, life without the possibility of parole, Eleanor stood still, her expression unchanged. "This court finds," the judge said, "that your crimes reflect a calculated cruelty that defies comprehension. You exploited trust, manipulated perception, and took lives not out of necessity, but greed and control. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison, where you can harm no one else." Eleanor leaned toward the microphone on the defense table. "You can't erase me from Pinewood Heights," she said. "I built that community. I kept it safe. They'll remember me." It was the closest thing to an epitaph she'd get. Outside, the cameras caught everything. Lisa and I walking down the courthouse steps side by side, neighbors hugging each other with a mix of relief and lingering disbelief. For months, they'd lived under the watch of a killer who smiled at them in passing, waved at block parties, and wrote their names in a notebook for reasons they never guessed. That night, Pinewood Heights felt lighter. People lingered on porches again. The community forum, once Eleanor's tool for control, had turned into a place where neighbors looked out for each other in ways that actually mattered. Still, there was an unspoken truth none of us missed. Eleanor hadn't just fooled us. She'd studied us, cataloged us, and if things had gone differently, some of us might have ended up in that freezer. Justice had landed. But the shadow she left behind would take a lot longer to fade. 6 months after the verdict, Pinewood Heights looked almost exactly the same. Same trimmed hedges, same seasonal wreaths, same kids on bikes chasing each other down Pine Ridge Drive. But if you lived here, you knew better. The HOA had rewritten its bylaws in the wake of Eleanor's arrest. New rules on surveillance cameras, no more pointing into other people's yards, no more anonymous incident reports unless you could provide verifiable evidence. The community forum now had moderators, and anything posted as an urgent alert required confirmation from 2 board members before it went live. The same people who'd once sat in folding chairs nodding politely through Eleanor's speeches now spoke openly about the fear they'd lived under, fear of becoming her next target, fear of the endless gossip threads she weaponized like a digital sword. Mrs. Garcia no longer checked her blinds every time she heard footsteps outside. The Pattersons let their dog roam the yard again without keeping it on a leash by the porch. The Johnson kids played basketball in their driveway without being told their noise levels were under review. Life was inching back toward normal. But normal felt different now. The cabin I'd bought for peace, the wraparound porch, the morning coffee, the whisper of the pines, was still my refuge. But now I carried something else with me when I sat out there, a sharpened sense of attention. Not the paranoia Eleanor thrived on, but awareness. Because here's the thing I couldn't shake. Eleanor had convinced herself she was protecting the neighborhood. She'd built a false reality where everyone else was the threat, and that belief made her dangerous. I'd seen versions of her before, in suspects who justified theft because the victim didn't need the money, in abusers who said they were just keeping someone in line. The costume changes, but the core stays the same. Control disguised as care. Sometimes the loudest voices calling for safety are the ones you need to watch most closely. Lisa said it best one night over coffee. She wasn't crazy, Jake. She was calculated. Crazy would have left loose ends. Eleanor tied everything up neat until she couldn't. And that was the other thing. For all her precision, all her planning, what brought her down wasn't my badge or Lisa's title, or even the search warrant. It was her need to be seen. Her hunger for control was so strong she put herself in the spotlight thinking she'd come out cleaner. Instead, she confessed. In front of 40 witnesses, at her own meeting. In a strange way, the neighborhood's healing came from that same public moment. Everyone had heard the truth together. No more whisper campaigns, no more split camps wondering if maybe she was right. They'd watched the mask come off in real time. It made the rebuilding easier. It made the trust come back faster. Still, I catch myself scanning the forum sometimes, not looking for trouble, just patterns, the way people talk, the way small complaints stack up, the way concern can turn into something sharper if left unchecked. Maybe that's my own scar from all this. Or maybe it's just wisdom. Either way, I know now that the most dangerous predators don't always kick down your door. Sometimes they knock, smiling, with cookies for the block party. Sometimes they sit in the front row of every HOA meeting. Sometimes they volunteer to keep the community safe. And sometimes they live right next door, watching you from behind the blinds. Some stories end with an arrest. This one didn't. Eleanor Whitmore's name became a cautionary tale, told in coffee shops and online forums far beyond Pinewood Heights. True crime channels dissected her case frame by frame. Headlines kept calling her the watchdog killer, a woman who'd built her power by convincing people she was the only one keeping them safe. But if you'd lived here, you knew the real story wasn't about a killer. It was about how easily a community can be blinded when someone wraps themselves in the flag of moral authority. Eleanor had spent years pointing at everyone else. My driveway, Mrs. Garcia's visitors, the Johnson kids' basketball hoop, until it seemed almost impolite to question her. She was the concerned neighbor, the pillar of the HOA, the eyes and ears of the street. The truth was, she was the most dangerous person in the neighborhood, and she'd been hiding in plain sight. Her house went on the market 6 months after her sentencing. The realtor tried to make it sound charming. Custom basement upgrades, large freezer included. Everyone knew, no one bit. It sat empty, a silent reminder of what had happened behind those perfect blinds. Life in Pinewood Heights found its rhythm again, but it was never exactly the same. People waved more, but they also asked more questions. If something seemed off, they checked. Not in a way that fed paranoia, but in a way that kept the quiet predators from slipping through the cracks. And me? I kept my mornings the same. Coffee on the deck, watch the sun hit the pines, listen to the hum of the neighborhood waking up. But I notice more now. Not to collect evidence, not to build a case against people who just live their lives, but because Eleanor taught me something I wish I didn't know, that the most dangerous accusations often come from the mouths of those with the most to hide. She'd wanted everyone to believe I was the criminal. She'd almost made it work, too, but in the end, her own need for control turned the spotlight on her, and under that light, Every lie, every theft, every murder became visible. The community didn't just get justice for Tommy and Robert, they got their power back. The fear she'd sown into every block, every gathering, every forum thread, gone. Sometimes justice isn't swift. Sometimes it creeps forward, case file by case file, rumor by rumor, until the right moment arrives. And when it does, it's worth the wait, because here's the truth. We all have that one neighbor, the one who watches too closely, the one who knows too much about everyone's business, the one whose smile never quite reaches their eyes. Maybe they're just nosy, or maybe, like Eleanor, they're hiding a darkness you can't see until it's too late. So trust your gut, ask the hard questions, and remember, the people shouting loudest about keeping you safe are sometimes the ones you need to be safest from. Pinewood Heights learned that lesson the hard way, and I'll never forget it.